This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan. When we think about a written language of English, there's a couple of phrases that come to mind. One in particular, it goes something like this. When people are communicating verbally, they might say something to someone such as, "Words fail me." But yet, that same person, if they were to take the time, they could perhaps take a pen or even on their computer, and they can communicate those things through the written word as opposed to the spoken word. It's just like there's a connection with it between that action of writing and those things that are contained within us that are written down. Today, I'm going to talk about a case that is in the very early stages of investigation, but it was so striking to me because this involves two people that were married and were in the throes of a divorce. And those, as many of you know, are very painful and contain a lot of emotion. But the alleged perpetrator in this case did leave a written note. His writing was allegedly scrawled in blood. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. I'm a bit morose today, I think, having to deal with this case and to talk about it with you, because it is evidence of a relationship that has come to a brutal end. And it seems as though that in these writings that we're going to discuss, something fell apart as far as communication. And I don't know in what sense that occurred, but many times these cases that we cover on Body Bags, we have no rhyme or reason to try to understand what motivation there is behind something. But when you see people that are writing text messages and leaving notes behind written in blood, that takes us to a completely different level.
John Wonder is 31 years old. His wife, Ashli, is 29. And they've been married for a couple of years. They have two children, two boys, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. Ashli and John worked for the same company. They also had gone through many ups and downs in their relationship, financial and other. And they actually were still living together in their home, but were in the process of getting a divorce.
Isn't that an interesting situation to find yourself in, particularly if you're involved? And there's been a number of cases like this over the years, but I've always found that dynamic. I actually worked a couple like this as a death investigator, where you had people that were in the midst of going through a divorce, and you had like one party was living in the basement of the house and occupying, they had a separate area to exit the house. And I've always felt like that familial kind of dynamic that was once where you were kind of together as a family and you're occupying this dwelling, and all of a sudden this contentious thing rises up between you as a couple, and you're having to see one another still. You're talking about that you're going to split, make it permanent. You're not going to be around one another, but yet you're still under the same roof. And then to work in the same environment as well. That dynamic, I would think, is, I can't even begin to imagine it, because divorce in and of itself is so very, very painful.
It is a very stripped down version of yourself at oftentimes your worst. I don't know all the ins and outs of the relationship. I don't. Nobody does. But I do know that there was actually a plan. Ashli was planning on moving out at the end of September, 1st of October. Everyone knew it. Mentioned they worked together at the same company. Everybody there knew that this couple was going through a divorce. And when they didn't show up for work, the employer called the police for a welfare check. Now, I don't know about you, Joe, but I've had people working with me and for me that if they didn't show up and I couldn't get them on the phone, I would go over and check on them maybe. But my first thought wouldn't be call the police and have them go over and see what's going on. So obviously, there was a known possibility of violence and what have you in this relationship that made the employer call the police.
Yeah, and one of the things that we do relative to investigations when you have these familial events that occur like this within a family, I don't know about you, I wouldn't consider everybody I'm related to be my friend. Now, I love my family. Don't get me wrong. But
You're not the person they're going to call at 2 a.m. needing help.
right. You choose who your friends are going to be. And it's really interesting that for many of us that work in close proximity to other people, you wind up being closer with those individuals that are in your workspace than you do with people that are extended family and this sort of thing. And here's the interesting note about this. When we're conducting a death investigation, and I think that a lot of people that are listening to this can understand and comprehend this, somebody's going to walk through the door at work and bring their home life with them many times. And they'll start just, I don't know any other way to describe it. They'll just start vomiting on their coworkers, that how horrible it is at home, or how even conversely, how great it is at home. And if people have a comfort level, I think, with relationships that they develop at work. So when we go out to conduct a death investigation, and it can be any kind of death. This is particular keen in suicide. We're keen to extract information from coworkers. You can go and talk to them, and they will reveal details, intimate details about victims that you never would get from, say, a cousin, perhaps, somebody that doesn't have an awareness of what's in. It seems rather simplistic, but it's one of the major sources of data, places to collect data about an ongoing case where we can begin to understand things about the dynamic that went on.
Let me set this up a little bit, okay? It's about 10:30 in the morning. Ashley and John Wonder have not shown up for work, but around 8:30 that morning, John had taken the boys over to Ashley's parents' house. Ashley's mom watched the boys when they were at work. And so John had taken the boys, again, ages 4 and 2. He was driving his red car. So John drops the kids off, but he doesn't do what he normally does. Normally he goes, knocks on the door, takes them inside, gets them all situated, and goes on about his merry way. That didn't happen on this particular morning. John dropped the boys off. He's driving his red car. He drops the boys off on the front porch and leaves. He doesn't go inside. He doesn't wait for Ashley's mom to come out and get the kids. Nothing. Ashley's mother made a note. Hey, this is different. What's up with this? 2 hours later, they get the call from police. They're going to do the welfare check. So mom and dad, Ashley's mother and father, go to Ashley and John Wonder's home. At the same time, the police are there. The reason I pointed out that John had driven his red car earlier to drop the kids off because his red car was there at the house when the police arrived for the welfare check. But Ashley had a rented yellow Toyota RAV4 and it was gone. So that's what police are trying to figure out. They don't know what they're walking into. They just know the couple's in the middle of a divorce. They didn't show up for work. John dropped the kids off at Ashley's mom's house, but now they can't get John or Ashley on the phone. So the police decided, let's make entry into the home. And Ashley's dad actually walked around to the back of the house and found a sliding glass door that was unlocked. And he went in. It was Ashley Wonder's father that discovered this bloody mess. He found his own daughter in the laundry room with a door tied off with a bungee cord. His 29-year-old daughter, mother of his 2 grandchildren, is laying on the floor, naked from the waist down. She's been stabbed, punctured, sliced. There's a butcher knife, a cleaver next to her body. And on her leg, the word in blood, Wonder. Joseph Scott Morgan, how much blood would have been on the scene?
A volume sufficient to make a father recoil in horror. I can't even begin to imagine discovering my baby girl in this state. And unfortunately, this happens many, many times. Those that are within your circle are the ones that bear witness or the first eyes on a horrific scene like this. And depended upon how long she lived after the initial attack with these edged weapons is going to dictate how much blood there would be there. And also to a lesser degree, probably the manipulation of the body, because you can turn bodies and try to move them in certain ways. And if they have open defects in the body, you'll have leakage from the blood. So it's not just the dynamic of, say, spurting blood. You'll have this kind of blood that will issue forth from wounds. And this can even occur, the seepage can actually occur even after death, particularly if someone has moved the body. And here's one other element that I wanted to point out. The fact that this young woman, when the father first cast his gaze on his daughter, beyond the blood, and maybe he saw the weapons at that point in time, it's hard to really describe or understand that, because you kind of take a snapshot in your brain. And I've talked to a lot of first on-site witnesses relative to these horrific kind of events. Your brain, it's almost like that moment in time where you see something that you have to do a double take because your brain can't process it. And that happens to us in life a lot, but how much more so in an event like this where you're looking down. The other thing that he may have observed at that point in time that kind of rose up in this is that Ashli has got a belt around her neck as well. And this is a form of a ligature. So the big question now, particularly as it applies to the police and the medical examiner, how did she actually die? Was it from sharp force injury, or was she choked to death with a belt? It's one thing when you're investigating a death to have a single modality of death, and think gunshot wound, stab wound, blunt force trauma, or ligature strangulation. But when you have two potential modalities of death, it complicates it from an investigative standpoint. First off, it complicates it in the sense that what is the actual weapon that brought about the death? And if both were utilized, how could we do that relative to sequencing? And they're both utilized. So what was the overwhelming factor in a death? And in this particular case, Dave, we're looking at both sharp force injury death as well as potential ligature strangulation. That's something we have to make sense of.
Back up for just a minute. The welfare check, when the employer calls police, can you do a welfare check? I'm sure they give them some background information. Couples going through a divorce, kind of concerned neither one showed up. But when they arrived to do this check, what would motivate the police to allow the dad? I mean, they can't get in the front door. They don't have a key or whatever. But why would police let the dad go around and see if he could find a way in? It seems to me that that would be their job. I'm not blaming the police. Boy, I want to make sure I'm not. I just am curious why they would allow that to happen. Why wouldn't they go and see if there was a door open?
Well, this is why. Yeah. And who's to say that the dad didn't have somebody behind him? We don't know, but I can give you kind of the short answer relative to this if I'm actually capable of giving a short answer about anything. In this case, when you're doing a welfare check, you don't know if, in fact, there is somebody within this environment that is deceased. You don't know that a crime has been committed at this point in time. So for a police officer to make entry into a home, you're on very thin ice when it's an issue of constitutional considerations, search and seizure, and just privacy. People have an expectation, just because they're not answering the phone doesn't mean that a cop can kick in the door. So the default position in this particular case is you say to the family member who may have initiated the call, we think that it actually initiated from the office, but you have a family member there. Well, they're interested. They understand the lay of the land. They're the ones that are going to go make entry. Now, if the family member sees something in there, believe me, these police officers go out on welfare checks all the time, Dave. It's almost like cops get false alarms all the time on burglar alarms, and you'll hear them on the radio. It's kind of an odd thing where they'll say, yeah, we got another open door burglar alarm that's going on at such and such Main Street, and they go out there all the time. It's almost the same way with welfare checks. They go do welfare checks all the time. It doesn't mean that you're going to find somebody that is brutally murdered in their own home. So the default position would be the dad. Have the dad open the door, look in there, and when he sees this, you can imagine he certainly requested the presence of the police at that time.
I know she's got puncture wounds, but is it possible that the suspect here was trying to stage something, maybe to make it look like she was trying to kill herself in the throes of depression from getting a divorce or what have you, and that maybe that just didn't work, and so he went ahead and killed her by strangulation and a knife? Or do we even know, or can we find out, rather, which came first, the knife or the strangulation?
Yeah, let's go back to the idea of the utilization of a belt as a ligature to facilitate death. In answer to your question, yes. And we have to understand that in my line of work, and there's people out there that are doing it right now, that are out there as we're speaking right now, that are medical legal death investigators, we handle far more suicides than we ever will homicides. I think that everybody thinks that homicides top everything. They're not. They're the lowest percentage of manners of death. And so we're very good in my field. We're very good at investigating suicides because they outpace in many jurisdictions. I've seen numbers as high as 3-1 outpacing homicides. And you don't ever hear about a suicide unless it's somebody famous, but still it's a death investigation. And many times it's a violent death. So my experience, I've probably seen at least equal numbers of deaths where something other than a rope has been used as a ligature. And in this particular case, we're talking about a belt. And here's the thing. When people think about modes of death and attacks and all those sorts of things, and even suicides, what's common in the environment that can be used in order to facilitate either a homicide or suicide? Well, I think everybody I know, I would have to say, I guess, owns a belt. So that's at your fingertips. Literally, it's something that can be used and has been used for years and years and years. What else can be used? Well, a knife, a meat cleaver. All of those elements are there within that environment. And so everything has to be taken into consideration when you're doing your examination on a body, because that's why it's so important to understand we've got two lethal modalities with this environment that are literally on display right there at your feet as an investigator. And it's a chicken or an egg situation. You're trying to determine what was it that we can kind of assess at this point in time that brought about the death. Now, you're not necessarily going to be able to appreciate that at the scene. That's why bodies are removed from the scene and taken to the medical examiner or the coroner's office, and an autopsy is performed, because this is a determination that can only be made on the autopsy table. We don't have some kind of magic vision where we can stand over a body and say, this is definitely the cause of death. There are a lot of people that say, well, why in the world do you have to do an autopsy in this case? Well, because if we don't do an autopsy in these particular cases, in any kind of case, once that body is either taken to the funeral home or taken to the crematory, that opportunity's lost, Dave.
So you got to take care of everything.
You have to. And everything has to be taken into consideration. The old adage about you cast a wide net, you catch a lot of fish. Intellectually, that's kind of where our mind is. Everything is on the table. Everything is to be considered at this unknown spot at this particular time, because you weren't there to bear witness to this. You're an investigator coming out to investigate the scene, to try to determine what had actually taken place, because you're going to need answers. And in this case, there's a lot of unanswered questions.
We've got the belt around her neck. They made mention of a bungee cord being used on the laundry room door. They made mention of the knives, but also puncture wounds and stab wounds. I thought that those were just different words for the exact same thing.
No, not at all, because in our world, puncture wound implies a specific element that would create, how can I describe it? In court, you'll read medical examiner reports, autopsy reports, where we will use the term defect, D-E-F-E-C-T, defect. A defect in our world, essentially, if you want to break it down to the elemental level, means whole. And when you see multiple defects in a body, well, that can mean anything. What we're saying in a roundabout way is to say that there are multiple holes in a body. But when you break it down and you say we have stab wounds, well, stab wounds have a particular nature to them. First off, they're defined as narrow and deep. And what does that mean? Well, the actual hole or the defect in the body, when that knife, that sharp-edged weapon is inserted, it creates this kind of linear defect, which means line. And I've often described it to my students as a winking eye if it's a single-edged weapon. Okay, and most knives are. You don't come across a lot of double-edged knives like daggers. So most, and in this particular case, there's a butcher knife found, which is a single-edged weapon. So it looks like that defect actually looks like a winking eye. Just imagine that in your mind. With a puncture wound, that implies a circular hole, a circular defect. Well, what can do that? Well, there are a number of things that can create a circular defect. If you have, say, for instance, a piece of rebar, which is the structure that you use to, rebar is used to shore up concrete. You pour over it. It's steel, very hard substance. If someone is punctured with a piece of rebar and that's withdrawn, you'll see a circular defect. As a matter of fact, in street population in Atlanta, for instance, when I was working there, we had a group of guys that would carry around homemade shanks or shivs, as they're called in prison. They're made out of rebar. One end's wrapped with duct tape as a grip, and they would puncture people multiple times with these to defend themselves with. Well, Dave, when you withdraw this thing, you leave behind a circular defect, and guess what else it looks like? It looks like a bullet hole. So you have to be very careful when you're using terms. And that's what's very confusing about this case, because we've heard the term puncture wound and we've heard the term stabbing. And those are completely two different types of injury. So there's a bit of confusion in the language here.
That's just amazing that we've got a belt around the neck. We've got puncture wounds, stab wounds. We've got a butcher knife and a cleaver next to the body. We've got the name Wonder spelled out in blood on the leg. And I made a note of this because I don't know if it means anything to you. In the police report, it said that she was bleeding on the left side. That was actually written in the police report. So I'm wondering, based on everything that we know about the crime scene, with bleeding in her left side with several puncture wounds, does that indicate that she was alive and the heart was still pumping blood at the time of the puncture wounds, the stab wounds?
Oh, yeah, that's going to be an indication of that. But we have to be very specific. Investigations have to be very specific in their language. And this case centers a lot on language, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And we haven't even got to the text messages coming up.
You think about when the police report is saying that on her left side, are they saying to the underlying floor on the left aspect of the body, on the left side of the body? Or are they talking about there's on the actual surface of the body that there's a lot of blood on the left side? There's a lot that can be, I guess, opined about relative to that. And also, if you have injuries, say, to the left side, we're talking, maybe the left rib cage, left of the sternum, left of the midline, all of that. It can be the left arm. Is there an underlying pool of blood on the floor? And you can have seepage that comes out of the body even after death. Well, to what degree? We know that she was found lying on the laundry room floor, but we don't know what her actual position was. If she's left recumbent, which recumbent is a term that's used in medicine. So if you think about left recumbent, the individual is on their left side, and the medical professionals out there will understand somebody is rotated into the left recumbent position. That means that the left side is dependent. It's bearing the weight of the rest of the body, and the right side is up in the air. Were they in what's referred to as a supine position? Supine is a fancy way of saying face up. And you can appreciate the body as the body is looking up toward the ceiling, for instance. You can observe trauma on the left side. You can see the seepage of the blood. You can see the pooling of the blood, and it might all be on the left side. But here's the thing. You're not going to understand any of this, and I mean any of this, until the body is thoroughly examined back at the morgue, and you begin to understand things about wound tracks. You understand things about asphyxiation that may have led to this woman's death. My wife likes to say a phrase on a regular basis, and I've learned a lot from this phrase. She says that words are containers of power. You say something, and many times it'll manifest itself in your life. If you're communicating negative thoughts or angry thoughts and that sort of thing, it'll manifest itself. And conversely, if you're saying things that are kind and supportive, that's going to manifest itself many times. Your words say a lot, not just in the communication between people, but they actually say a lot about you as a person. And I think that we've kind of got an insight into this relationship with just the words that are here, Dave.
I see a story where somebody has allegedly scrawled a name in blood on a victim or on a wall or what have you. I immediately think of the Manson murders.
Yeah, and LaBianca's too. Yeah, the Manson. And yeah, absolutely. I thought that same thing, man. I did.
It's just something that for our generation that comes up because that was a big part of what was reported. And then I think about this young couple. You know, they're not old. John Wonder is 31 years old. His wife is 29. They've got 2 children, 2 little boys, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. This is their mom and dad. And even though they were going through a divorce, they were cohabitating. And yet here we are where a welfare check leads her dad, Ashli Wonder's dad, to find her body naked from the waist down. She's stabbed. She's punctured. She's got a belt around her neck and the word Wonder scrawled in blood on her leg. Then we find out that her husband, John Wonder, Ashli Wonder's husband, her maiden name is Ehrhardt. And oftentimes she's referred to as Ashli Ehrhardt. But I just want to make a point. They were still married. They were going through a divorce. And by the way, Ashli had already made note. She was leaving October 1st. She was moving out. She had another place that she was going to. This was known to their friends, their employer, their family. It was no secret. So John Wonder drops the kids off, doesn't take them inside, drops them on the patio, on the front porch, and goes back home where this takes place. We know that after he left his wife with a belt around her neck, laying in a pool of blood, he scrawls his name Wonder on her left leg, and then he leaves. But he starts texting people. He starts texting family and friends. And this goes back to, I don't know if it's generational, Joe. I tried to find if there was anybody else who had done something similar, but I couldn't find any. His sister tried to reach out to him when they did the welfare check. Immediately, family's calling family. Hey, have you talked to John? Have you talked to Ashli? And so John's sister said that after she attempted to reach out to him, asking where he was, he allegedly responded to her. John, where are you? What's going on? He wrote back this, quote, "Sorry about the mess. For the record, it's way easier and much more satisfying than you can imagine. See you around."
Holy smokes.
He texted that to his sister.
That in and of itself is a real insight into the workings of someone's mind. And let's keep in mind, John Wonder has merely been charged. He's not convicted. He hasn't been put on trial, however.
He texted a friend on Facebook. Now, I don't know if he used Facebook Messenger so it was private or if he did it on the guy's wall. I don't know. But John Wonder allegedly messaged a friend. Again, same time now. Hey, bud, sorry to make you the receiver of this, but I have to share with someone. I'm about to throw my phone out the windows and will continue north to Fargo. I'm not trying to get away. Just feel like driving far away.
Wow. I mean, there's so much information contained in there. First off, you've got timestamps on all of these messages, whether it be in a Facebook format or platform, or if this is originating as a text message from a phone. All that stuff is timestamped relative to when you generated that message and perhaps your movement as well. That one comment that was made relative to heading north to and it's a specific location, heading to Fargo, North Dakota. Now, I've never made the drive, but just looking at a map, if you're talking about going from KC to Fargo, that's a poke, man. I mean, that's a long, long way. But let me back up just for a second. Before any text messages were generated, and we've kind of touched on this idea of writing in blood. There's a little known group. You hear about them in movies and whatnot. I've got several friends that are actually forensic document examiners or handwriting analysts, and they live in a different world than they used to because text messages and that sort of thing, and people don't write as many notes as they used to. But the fact that you've got this word that has allegedly been scrawled on Ashli's remains there on the laundry room floor is significant. And what will perhaps happen is that detailed images will be taken of that wording. I hope that they were very, very careful, Dave, when they were transporting her body so that that scrawl was not diminished in any way, because when you get a body back to a morgue, you have, first off, the correct equipment that you need to utilize, lighting, this sort of thing, and you can use a variety of different types of cameras in order to capture that image. And so when that image is captured, it'll be perhaps taken to the handwriting section at the state crime lab. Most handwriting examiners live and work within the construct of the state crime lab. It's not necessarily something that'll happen on a local level. They will look at the scrawl that is written in blood. And did you know that after you have hit about age 6, your motor skill, as it is kind of connected to your brain, the way you visualize things, the relationship, but your eyes, the way your eyes in relationship to your hand, the movement, did you know that that's all set in place by the time you're about 6 years old? And utilizing pens, crayons, all that sort of stuff. And even though it might evolve over a period of time, you've set down a framework in the way you write. So there will be examples of his writing, the accused, there will be examples of his writing that will be brought to the handwriting expert, and they will compare his handwriting that he has generated, whether it's signing papers or writing notes or anything that he has generated over the years, and it will be brought in and it will be actually compared to the scrawl that is written on her leg to see if they can confirm that it is actually him. Because at this point in time, you don't know. I mean, it's just like you were saying with staging. The defense in a case like this can say, well, somebody was trying to target my defendant, and they knew that if they scrawled his name in blood, that it would lead back to him. And that's something the defense attorney would probably say. So that question will be asked, and it will have to be answered. And the handwriting expert will come on the stand and make comment about that. And there's 2 forms when you think about script writing that everything is based on. There's what's referred to as the Palmer School and the Zahner-Bloser School. And you can actually regionalize. You could regionalize where people learned how to write regionally based upon those 2 forms of writing. And I'll give you an example of what this looks like. Do you remember when we were in school and they were teaching you how to write cursive? They would put the letters written in cursive up on the board, or it would be in like little placards up on the board so that you could see what a capital F looked like as opposed to a lowercase f, and it would be written in its own lines. And that's how we learned to write. And depended upon, many times it used to be with whatever region you were in the U.S., that's how you learned to write. Zahner-Bloser was more common in southern and midwestern areas of the country, but yet you had the Palmer, which you would find perhaps up in the Northeast. And isn't that kind of interesting that you can profile the person based upon their handwriting? So his motor skills that he would have learned, or whoever the perpetrator is, as it applies to how he writes something, is going to be unique to him, because you use that framework of those 2 possibilities and you narrow it down how you kind of craft your own writing.
That's just crazy. But one thing I want to go back to, Joe, you mentioned, why would you go to all the trouble of an autopsy when you know what already has taken place? And why do you go to all this trouble? I mean, you're talking about a lot of effort and a lot of work, when in reality, it looks like we have a man who has pretty much admitted by his own text messages to friends and family that he has done this. He actually says, this to review a couple of the text messages, Joe, he added to that same friend on Facebook, he said that he hadn't cried yet. Haven't cried, but he, quote, still feel nothing. No more anxiety, though. That's a plus. And then he wrote this about the stones that he left by her body. Apparently, she had some types of stones and things that people have a certain affinity for that, protect them from different things, this new age stuff. And he said, well, quote, a lot of good they did you, hon. I mean, how cold is that, Joe? How cold is it to point out, yeah, a lot of good they did you?
Yeah, it is. And again, when you begin to think about our friends like Karen Stark, you think about how they would examine this. But let's look at this from a purely scientific perspective or an investigative perspective. If you're mentioning these stones in particular, you're stating in a text message that I laid them out next to the body. How can we validate that statement? Well, logically, you can validate it by documenting at the scene, if they are in fact there, that they are present. Who would have knowledge of that? Who would know that particular stones were laid out adjacent to the body? And so when you couple that with, and let's just get in, let's just go for it. Let's talk about if you've handled a knife and there's blood, you've got blood on your hands, that knife, unless you clean it off, there's a high probability you're going to leave a bloody fingerprint, a latent print that's behind on the handle of that knife. You could have blood perhaps on this meat cleaver, which has not really been addressed. It's there. Ownership of the belt. Whose belt is this? Why was it used? Was it her belt or was it the accused belt? Is there any blood on the surface of the belt? And that gives you an indication that if there is blood transfer on that belt, particularly as if you've left behind a latent print on the belt, well, what does that mean? It means that she had blood on her person or in the immediate area that is her blood. You could type her blood, and that his, perhaps the accused, fingerprint was found in latent blood on the surface of the belt. So that gives you an idea, perhaps, that ligature came after the stabbing. Or conversely, if it's absent of that, prosecution might say, well, he attempted to strangle her. He found out it wasn't going to work, so he went and retrieved a knife, or maybe he had the knife with him. And that's, again, a way that we can try to understand the sequencing of these things.
Back to the text messages and social media messages that John Wonder allegedly posted and sent. Quote, "I'm guessing they will be finding her body right about now. I started getting calls at 9:30 a.m. Now, he wrote this message to his friend in one of his last messages before he was arrested. And this is what I wanted to point something out. 8:40 a.m., John Wonder drops the boys, hit 4 and 2, off at his mother-in-law's house, at Ashli Wonder's mom's house. And he doesn't take them in. He drops them off, runs to his house. Now, he's saying he started getting calls at 9:30. So I'm assuming this is work, calling, see why they weren't at work yet. And we know that police were called and went out there at 10:30 to do the welfare check. So we now have a timetable. He says to this person, allegedly, that I'm guessing they will be finding her body right about now. I've got a feeling that's a pretty strong thing the prosecution would want to have in evidence, right?
Yeah, it is, because you're aware the individual generating that note is going to have an awareness of the timeline. They're going to have an awareness. And the reason they're going to have an awareness of this is that this individual is already stating in these text messages that he is being contacted, and he's offering up, this explanation of, well, they should be finding her body right about now because I have been receiving messages since this specific time. And that gives you an idea of awareness, doesn't it?
Quote, "I keep thinking about how she never screamed. Just took it like a champ. What a gal. To honor her, I will not go out by a gunshot suicide by cop, but by, hopefully, a similar fate as Ashli," unquote. He wrote that about the mother of his children.
Yeah, I think that probably out of everything contained here, from certainly a communication standpoint, that might be the darkest. He gives you an insight, a firsthand account, if you will, of this woman, a mother, and yes, still a wife, that she just kind of slipped off into the darkness as she was being brutalized. If you or anyone in the midst of a relationship where there is, in fact, domestic violence going on, I urge you, I plead with you, reach out to somebody. And one of the quickest ways to do that is the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And that number is 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.